All right. Hi, everyone. We are live. Welcome to this week's Empowered Consent Conversations. I'm Christina McCabe, and I am alchemizing and facilitating this culture of empowered consent. And today we are gathered to talk about empowered consent and power dynamics. I am joined by this week's guest expert, Devyn Stone. Welcome, Devyn. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to get your voice heard and to play with you in this space.
Me too. This is going to be fun.
I'm going to invite him to introduce himself in just a moment, a little bit more. But first, I want to give you a bit more information about why we are here and how we are going to flow today. So these empowered consent conversations are where we are gathered to bring you a topic to explore and get you the tools to create empowered consent in all of your relationships in a way that really gets you heard, understood, and fulfilled. Yes, please. We are exploring consent with a focus on it being exciting, healing, inspiring, an avenue for intimacy and connection, and quite frankly, often super sexy. Take a look at the description above and you will find Devyn and my contact information as well as a YouTube link. Of course, if y'all are joining us on YouTube, you're already there with us. To watch past forum replays, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to get notified when we're on here or when I put out a new video. You will also see a couple of links I have included in this conversation and in others. I sometimes refer to the work of the Consent Academy. I just love the work they're doing and want you to have their information as well, as they are a valuable resource. So you'll find that in the description. Also, we love you to be involved. So feel free to ask questions, make comments via the chat, and I will monitor them to get you heard if I'm able. At the very end, stick around. There's a resource roundtable in which Devyn and I will let you know what we're up to and how you can work with us in the future if you should like to know a little bit more about that. All right, just a little bit of a trigger warning. We are talking about power dynamics, just in case something comes up that is triggering for you. Please make sure that you have your self-care in place so that you can take care of yourself. And I also want to just note that this is a space in which differences of opinion are welcome. I believe they offer us the opportunity to explore, expand, and shift our understanding and perspective. Each person participating in these live events are speaking with their own voices as well, while we support each other and are showing up in our highest integrity with loving intention. We are not responsible for the voices of the other speakers. All right, let's get Devyn introducing. Would you like to let everyone know who you are while you're here?
I would be happy to. I was so excited to be in here. My name is Devyn Stone. I am Devyn Stone everywhere. I use that name throughout all of the different communities that I hang out in. My pronouns are he, him. My honorific is sir if you choose to use one with me. I am an author. I've written several books about kink and S&M. I am a alternative lifestyles coach, so I help people discover what they like to do in kink and what they like to do in their relationships. I also help folks occasionally negotiate their relationships. I am a full-time kink and consent educator, and I've been practicing authority transfer since 2014, and I currently own one property slave. That's me.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and I'm really excited to get your perspective on power dynamics. I know you have a lot of experience and do a lot of work around this. Yeah. So I always start these by asking, what is empowered consent? I really like for our viewers to get that perspective from each person that joins. So what is empowered consent to you, Devyn?
For me, I have kind of a sordid history with consent. I started out my journey as someone that didn't know how to say no. And the more involved that I got into the kink community and the more I started spending time in classes and in spaces where people were practicing consent, I started to kind of build that for myself. So for me, empowered consent is a combination of self-awareness, right? Knowing yourself and knowing your wants and desires and the things that bother you and the things that don't, along with the ability to say yes and to say no, and to basically stick by your guns and say, you know, I said no and I meant it, or I said yes and I meant it. And that's kind of how I see empowered consent.
Thank you. Yeah, that all resonates with me as well. This tapping into self-awareness is really important. I have been playing a lot, as I mentioned, with the Consent Academy. So I'm going to read their little blurb on what consent is, because I think it's really relevant. So consent here is to have the capacity, information, agency, and ability to give honest and authentic answer without coercion or undue influence. I play a lot with capacity. There's so many levels of us being able to hold capacity and freedom of expression. Yeah. For me, being able to not only know what we want, but also express it is really important.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up the Consent Academy's definition. I am absolutely enthralled with the Consent Academy. I've gotten to take a few of their intensives, and I volunteered with them a little bit last year during the pandemic. And they're a fantastic resource. If you ever get a chance to go to their classes or their intensives, they're super eye-opening.
Yes, please, everyone follow the link. I'm actually doing our leadership series right now, which is probably why you're hearing so much from me, because I'm just eating it up. I'm so in love with it. It's such my passion.
So much good stuff.
So much good stuff. And honestly, it's all volunteer led, and they are so accessible.
Yes.
Their workshops are very affordable and really inclusive.
I would absolutely agree. A terrific resource.
Yay. So moving forward, the next thing I like to define is our topic. And our topic today is power dynamics. So what does that mean? Yeah, right? What are power dynamics?
So for me, and there are a lot of different definitions of power dynamic. My definition is not the end all be all. It's definitely not even the only one out there. But for me, because I spend time in the master, slave, and owner property community, for me, power dynamic basically talks about a relationship between two or more people that have made a committed agreement to have a power exchange or authority transfer relationship. In most situations, what that typically looks like is the person that would like to give the authority gives the authority to another human. And I talk a lot about different levels of authority and different types of authority, and none of these relationships look exactly alike. But for me, power dynamic to me is an umbrella term that I've used to describe any type of power exchange or authority transfer relationship. And it's typically what you see when you go to a BDSM conference and they're putting together, well, this is our power dynamic class section. This is our kink and S&M class section. So I kind of see that as more of an umbrella term that can mean a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it can mean a lot, which is why this is such a huge topic to explore.
Absolutely.
And unearth. And this is the second time we're exploring in my conversations power dynamics. And we will keep doing it because there are so many different areas of life and consent where power comes into play. In fact, I'd say it's probably something that we have to really pay attention to primarily. Yeah. I mean, thank you. Yeah. Age, role, level of experience, social position, privilege, financial position. And then we go into like the more intimate, yummy, sexy places as well as kink and authority, like you're talking about. Yeah. Super fun. Power dynamics definition that I found online is power impacts your ability to both give and receive. Within Well, power is a person's ability to exert influence and control. So within consent relationships, the power dynamic refers to how power affects the relationship between us. Mm-hmm. Right. So the way that we have an ability, that capacity to give or receive consent may be super impacted by whether we're in that position of power, higher or lower.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you want our viewers to know when it comes to power dynamics and creating empowered consent?
I think that one of the things that we have to focus on at the beginning of creating those situations is to understand that there are some places where you live in a position of power, or you exist in a position of power, even just temporarily, depending on who you're in the room with, based on a lot of different factors. And, you know, there's a difference in what I would call a vanilla situation at the grocery store, being in a position of power versus not being in a position of power. And for me, in my realm of things, it gets a lot more complicated when you're already in a position of imbalanced power from a socioeconomic standpoint, or a racial standpoint, or an age or experience standpoint. And then you want to add conscious power imbalance by including an element of power exchange or authority transfer. So you're basically layering power imbalance upon power imbalance upon power imbalance. And, you know, kind of depending on the intersectionalities you live in, that can get really complex.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So keeping in mind that, you know, we don't always choose whether or not we have power in a situation just based on that. You know, we may not have the upper hand because of that situation, but we can always speak up.
So we may not choose whether we have power, but we can always speak up. So in what places are we able to choose?
Well, I find that, you know, when I'm in a position where I can make a choice, a lot of it is within my dynamic, right? In my dynamic with my partner, because we've chosen a relationship that gives me power. So I have the choice there, right? When I walk down a street, I have a choice. I can go left or I can go right. But when I drive down a street, I can technically go down the street the wrong direction, but there's something that's going to happen from that situation, right? There's consequences.
Yeah.
And I think that we can have these situations in any part of our lives, right? It's not just about relationships. It can be, you know, just individually walking down a street. But in my opinion, we have a choice in every aspect of life. I don't believe there is ever a time that you don't have an option. I have been in situations that were uncomfortable. I've been in situations that were, you know, slightly out of the ordinary, and I've been in situations that were life-threatening. I've always had a choice. There is not a time where you don't have that.
Yeah, I would say that I agree. However, being, you know, I have quite a bit of privilege as a white woman. And so there's a lot of choice for me, right? Sometimes the choice may be to stay with danger or to push forward toward danger. I mean, how do you think privilege and social dynamics, social structure plays into that aspect of choice?
I think that, you know, I think in certain situations where there are certain types of privilege, that there are more options. I think that in situations where a person may have less privilege in, you know, any situation with any type of privilege, but I think that even if you have less choices, there is still a choice. And making those choices is what makes us who we are. You know, and it makes up the time that we spend on this planet, and the things that we do, and the people that we touch. But I think that, you know, I hear the argument all the time that when I talk about consent, and when I talk about creating these situations where you've negotiated what's going to happen, I hear the argument all the time: what if somebody has a gun to your head? There's an option. there's a consequence, that doesn't negate the choice.
Right.
You know, whether the consequence is something that you don't want to happen, or something that's harmful, or something that's scary, or, you know, something that's, you know, it can go all the way from like slightly upsetting to life threatening, but that doesn't change the fact that there's a choice. You know, you can make the decision to stay in the situation. You can make the decision to go, you know, and for me, just because of the way that I talk about things, I also want to say that, you know, there are things that do influence your choices. You know, you have things like coercion, you have things like privilege, you have, you know, there's a billion different things that can impact that. And I don't want to discount that there are places where certain choices are not good for you. Certain choices are not what you need, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a choice.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna turn it just slightly, if that's okay. I want to play a little bit within, because I think sometimes we look at power dynamics and we go instantly that this is not a good thing. Power differences in consent, and yet it can be, right? I mean, where is power sexy? Where can power dynamics be healing?
I think that one of the things that I'm leaning on really in my relationship, kind of in the now, as I am unpacking a lot of my personal history and my personal trauma through my power exchange relationship. I'm in a relationship where I get to do whatever I want. There's no holds barred. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. And for me, as someone that spent the better part of my life doing what other people wanted me to, regardless of how I felt about it, and not being able to say no, and not being able to make a choice, I think that in this situation, one of the reasons that I find this relationship so healing is because I never came first in my life. And in this relationship, there's never a time that I don't come first. It doesn't matter how big or how small. It's, you know, if I wanted to buy a house tomorrow, I could buy a house tomorrow. If I wanted to, you know, if I wanted to go to a certain restaurant and my property wanted to go to a different one, we go to the place I want to go. There's no place where I have to take a back seat. And there's no place where I have to be scared or uncomfortable or unsure about saying no. I can say no whenever I want, however I want. And I can say no for my property as well. So I think that for me, this relationship is exceedingly healing. But there are times that it's also really, really hot. You know, I personally, like, there's a part of me that's a very large emotional sadist. And I love being able to go into spaces and, you know, sitting in a restaurant and knowing that my property hates tomatoes, finds them absolutely disgusting and wants nothing to do with them. And I can make it eat a whole plate of them. Just because it's fun. And like, it's a great thing. We call it the tomato face, and it's wonderful. And I get to have a lot of fun with that. And I get to sit and like point and make fun of them because it's fun. And, you know, there's no rhyme or reason to eating tomatoes. You know, it doesn't matter whether you do or whether you don't. But if you hate it and I make you do it, it's kind of fun.
Well, that's your dynamic, right? I mean, we get to play within what's sexy to us.
Yep.
What's healing to us, and that's consensual, right?
Absolutely.
If your partner in that has consented to that dynamic and is receiving something as well from it, right? Obviously, they must be if they've consented to that relationship with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think my property would call that the thing that it love hates. That's what it says all the time, is situations like that. It love hates it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. And for those of you that may just be joining or watching us or coming in partway through, we're exploring empowered consent and power dynamics. And Devyn is talking about his partner as property. That's an agreed upon statement for both of you.
Yes, it is.
And referring to them as it. That's, I'm assuming, also an agreed upon way of referring.
Yes, my property has chosen pronouns they and it. So I usually use it. Most other people usually use they, but it's kind of interchangeable for the slave.
Nice. Thank you. And, I love to explore all of this with a place of openness, right? Curiosity. In the erotic blueprint world, I'm an erotic blueprint coach. One of the blueprints is the kinky blueprint. And to us, kinky is anything that's taboo to you.
Yeah.
Right. And for one person, that could be doggy style, right? Maybe they only ever done missionary, and doggy style is super taboo. So that's their kink. Yes. Or wearing pink fluffy slippers every time they have sex. Maybe that's their kink. Whatever it is, whatever your kink is, if you're consensual with yourself and your partners around it, beautiful.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So in the erotic blueprint world too, we always talk about that when you're entering into consensual relationships, no matter where you are within that power dynamic, that you always have the right to change your mind and say no. How can power dynamics maybe impact our ability to either give or receive that changed answer?
I think that there are a lot of situations, and especially different styles of dynamics that I've seen. No can be really hard in some dynamics, whether it's from the top side, the person that's taking the authority, or the person that's giving the authority. I think that there are spaces and times where I've seen people really struggle with, I don't want to say no because I want to please my master. Or right. I don't want to say no because I want to take care of my submissive, So there are situations where I find that it can be really difficult to hear and receive that no, but it's also difficult to say it and to use it. I think in the community, probably the best example and the most common example that I see is somebody that's new and exploring, that's playing with somebody that's experienced. It's almost it's an unspoken power differential where we don't even talk about it. But as soon as you get into that situation, it's a palpable feeling that you can tell that this person is nervous. And, from my perspective as somebody that's experienced and shows people things all the time, I can feel from that person that they're nervous, but I have no way of telling if that's a nerve that they're willing to push through, or if that's a nerve that I shouldn't be touching, or anything else. I have no idea whether I should keep going or stop until someone says no. From the other perspective, that person wants to learn. That person wants to experience this fun thing that maybe they've been fantasizing about for a long time. But once they're in the situation, there are a lot of people that feel like they can't say no, or they shouldn't. Right. Or it's rude to say slow down or stop, or I think we should take a break, or, that thing in particular isn't really for me, but I'd like to try this other thing. So one of the things that I try really hard to explain anytime that I'm doing, even if it's a demo or, just a conversation, like, I want you to tell me if you're uncomfortable. I want you to tell me if you don't like this, because I'm here to show you something. And if you don't like it, then there is no point.
Right.
That sadist feeling that I get when my property eats tomatoes, it's because we have an arrangement and we have a connection. And it fills me in a really, really positive way to see my property pushing through something for me, because for me, there's an aspect of devotion to it. There's an aspect of like, I will take this thing and I will do it, even though I hate it, because I care for you so much and I want to make you happy. I don't feel that with somebody that I just met 5 minutes ago. I can't experience that level of devotion. So you pushing through just makes me uncomfortable.
Right. It's not going to give you the joy of the experience either, is it? And I think that's really important for people to understand, that have a hard time saying no because they're afraid of, I mean, it could be so many things, like you mentioned, that they may be afraid of not getting the other things they want, disappointing the person, not being included, especially if they're new, right? Oh gosh, am I not going to be accepted in this community if I don't say yes to everything, right? Or if I say no. So right, I want to finish that. I got all excited, so I was going to jump, but let's finish that thought. For those of you watching, if you're in that position, it doesn't tend to be, I mean, I guess it depends on the person, but it doesn't tend to be as exciting for the dom if you're not into it either. Right? I mean, I don't have the same enjoyment. I don't have enjoyment from someone participating with me in something that they don't really want to consent to. It leaves a bad, in fact, I get nauseous just even thinking about that.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, in my relationship, one of the things that we get is, you know, how do you feel that if it hates what's happening right now? And for me, the reality is that's you're looking at a detail. And what I see is the larger picture. My property loves to sacrifice for me. My property enjoys to make me happy, even when it's in pain, even when it's miserable or tired or whatever. But, you know, somebody on the outside looking in just sees that one little detail, like, oh, you're making it do a thing that it hates. But the reason that I enjoy that is because I know that it also enjoys it. Yeah,
it enjoys being devoted and pushing through for you and pleasing you, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
I could totally see that.
And I only feel that way with my property because of our time together and our conversations and our agreements and our alignment of will. I don't have that with somebody that walked into the dungeon 5 minutes ago and said, I want to try a knife scene. I don't have that.
You haven't developed the trust.
No.
Or the intimacy.
Not at all.
So how much responsibility do you have? You mentioned that if you're in that place of power and someone isn't saying no to you, all you can do is really listen to their words. However, is that all the way true? I mean, yes, all you can do is listen to their words. And yet, if you have so much experience and you're noticing signs that they're pulling away or not really engaged but having a hard time saying it, is it not in some way your responsibility to ask? To create a pause and say, I'm thinking maybe, are you really all in here? How much responsibility lies there with you?
Well, and I think too that it sounds almost like you're getting to two different points for me. Because when I'm in those situations, yes, I have a responsibility to ask, but not just because they might be making certain motions or certain noises or certain facial expressions, but because I should be asking those questions regardless.
Ah, yes, right.
I should be asking those questions if they're crying. I should also be asking those questions if they're happy, if they're giggling. I should be asking those questions if they're shaking. I should be asking those questions if they're, you know, if I'm tracing a knife across their arm and they're pulling away from me. I should be asking that question. I should also be asking that question if they're pushing their arm toward me.
Yeah, I just love it because you're coming from a place of not assuming you know their experience.
I've been in so many situations with so many people that have the same type of reaction that mean two very different things.
Totally.
I've played with people that I've known for years that when they start crying, that's like go time. That's the beginning. And like, that's when we've hit the sweet spot and they're ready to go for another hour.
Yeah.
But I've also played with bottoms that if one tear comes out of their eye, we're done. That's a full stop. Right. So I don't know. You know, and shaking for some people, like a hand shaking or feet shaking, for some people, that's a sign that they're feeling erotic. They're feeling excited.
Yeah, for sure.
And for some people, that's terrified.
Totally.
I have no idea, you know? And so I feel like, you know, that's the first part of that is I should be asking that question regardless of how they're reacting. The second part of that to me is if I ask those questions, if I get a firm yes, That's it for me. That's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a maybe, I stop.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a kinda or I'm not sure,
Mm-hmm.
I stop.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to hear from that person is, yes, I'm good. Keep going. Let's keep
Mm-hmm.
going. I'm happy. This is fine. I
Mm-hmm.
want to hear verbal affirmations, because if I hear anything else, I'm going to pull back.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to stop? Do we need to slow down? What do we need to do? Because I don't know. For that person, they might need just 2 seconds. Just take that knife off me for 2 seconds. Just stop touching my hair for 2 seconds. Whatever we're doing, they may just need a break. Or maybe they've discovered that's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever want to do that again. But I don't know that until I ask.
Yeah.
And for me, my responsibility stops at keeping myself safe.
Mm.
I don't have a responsibility to anyone else's life.
Mm.
I don't have a responsibility to anyone else's safety. That's one of the reasons that I identify very, very strongly with the consent acronym PRIC. Personal responsibility, informed consensual kink.
Yeah.
I do not have any responsibility over somebody else's life.
Mm-hmm.
That is not my bag. I have one thing. I am in charge of one other human's life force, and that's because I have taken that responsibility and said, I want this. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, if somebody's going through something and they're not communicating with me, there's no way. Would you like to say something about consent? No?
Okay.
He says meow.
I love everything that you're saying. I'm absolutely in line with, and thank you for your experience and bringing it forward here. So what about on the other side? What if somebody is entering into these relationships? Maybe I'm guessing as a beginner, or they may have already developed the ability to speak their voice. But if you're coming from that bottom space and you're having a hard time speaking, and what kind of do you have any tools or tips that people can use in order to step into those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably the most common thing that I've said is, it would disappoint me more if I was upsetting you.
Mm.
I think that in so many situations, I've seen more than anything, the reason that we don't want to, I'm being mauled by animals today. But the reason that I think I've heard so many people say, when I've sat with friends, or I've sat with new people that, we just talked a minute ago, and then they went and did something, and they sat back down and said, they didn't have a great experience. Why not?
Mm.
We always get to this part of the conversation where they say, I wanted them, him, her to stop, but I couldn't say stop. Right. Mm. And my initial reaction is, why?
Yeah, me too.
Right? Because you were trying something, and there was no obligation there. There was no, you didn't commit to anything. Mm-hmm. You said you wanted to try things. So why couldn't you say no?
Yeah.
And granted, I don't keep a logbook or anything, but I would tell you that I think about 90% of the answer is, I didn't want to disappoint the top, the dominant, the sir, the daddy, the mommy, the whoever.
That's what I hear too. Yeah.
And for me, to hear that as a dominant myself, as a top myself, you can't disappoint me. I don't know you. We don't have intimacy together. We don't have a friendship. We don't have a partnership. I can't be disappointed in you. It's not possible. But if I could, I would be more disappointed that you just tried to grin and bear it. I would so much rather someone walk away from a try, or a taster, or a demo with me and say, I went and played with Devyn and I learned that I don't like knives. I would celebrate the hell out of that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be any different than somebody that said, I just played with Devyn and learned knives are my favorite thing.
Yeah.
For me, it's the same level of excitement because I still got to show someone something that made them happy. You know, and maybe now you don't like that thing, so you're going to go try something else that's going to make you happy. And I'm down with that. That's good. Why would I be upset about that?
Right.
But, you know, I also don't want to take into myself anything that makes you uncomfortable. You know, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I'm here to show you something that makes you happy. I don't want you, you know, claws in the chair, just gritting your teeth and taking it.
Yeah.
I want you to either figure out that you like it and ask me to keep going, and then we can negotiate a further scene later, or figure out that you don't like it and I can introduce you to a friend that does something different.
Right. So what about people that may be coming from situations where they did experience that? I mean, what do you say maybe about those kind of, if somebody's beginning to explore and they run into a dom that is not supportive of their voice?
Those exist. Whoa!
Oh, Kitty is not having this.
He was like really upset that I wouldn't hold him. I have some claw marks in my head. That is non-consensual.
That was not consensual.
Terrific example of non-consensual. If somebody's having a conversation live,
non-consensual clawing.
You should not claw the top of their head.
Take a breath.
Right. So there are plenty of people that have been in the scene longer than me. There are plenty of people that have more experiences than me. But in my time, I have known many a top and many a dominant that are like that. I call those people unethical. I like to use the word unethical specifically.
Yeah.
Because I think that in a place where, you know, in like a kink utopia where everything is perfect, you would find people that want to help you explore. You would find people that want to teach you, that want to show you, that want to welcome you in and make you feel at home. I try very hard to be that person.
Yeah.
Which means that when I see somebody, you know, saying, I don't like that, and the top or the dominant is like, well, you're going to continue because I want to show you the thing. I don't see ethics in that situation because I never saw an agreement.
Right.
You know, and I look at that too as, you know, somebody that's been a dungeon monitor, that's somebody that's monitored parties and all of that stuff. You can't always tell whether or not somebody has, you know, just met 5 minutes ago, or if they've been in a relationship for 20 years, you can't always tell. But if I've seen parts of that interaction lead up to that moment, you know, if I just see a random couple in a dungeon, I have no idea of knowing what they've discussed, what they haven't discussed, how long they've been together, if they are together, you know, I can't know any of those things. But if I sat in the social area and I saw somebody walk up to somebody and say, I'm brand new and I heard you know how to use a flogger, I would like to try a flogger. And then 30 minutes later, I see them in the dungeon and the bottom is saying that hurts and I don't like it. And the top keeps going because you'll like it eventually. That I can tell is unethical. And for me, there's no excuse for that. And until you've had conversations and you've laid everything on the table and you've discussed that power imbalance, it doesn't exist. When I negotiate with a new bottom, I'm not a dominant. I'm a top. I just happen to know how to use the thing that you want to try. I'm not your dominant. I'm not in charge of you. You don't belong to me. You don't even have to call me sir. There's no, I try to limit that power imbalance as much as possible and explain to them too, we are on an equal playing field. I can say no, just like you can say no.
Right.
And, if I'm in a situation where somebody talks about having a hard time saying no, how would you feel if I said, I didn't like doing what we were doing, but I did it to make you happy? Like, that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. And so when we have that conversation, I often have people look at me and go, wow, I never thought of it that way. I'm like, well, that's what you're doing. If you're keeping that to yourself, I don't know if I'm making you happy. I don't know if I'm making you uncomfortable or upset or scared or, and I don't want to do any of those things unless that was the plan. Because, let me be clear. I like scared, pretty things, but only if that was the plan. I love people crawling away from me in fear and crying and screaming, please don't hurt me, but only because that was the idea.
Because that was already created as the part of the play.
Exactly.
That was part of it. You mentioned you said, I'm not your dom, I'm a top. What's the difference there when it comes to power?
So for me, and it may be different for a lot of people, there are many definitions, but for me, a top is someone that engages in an action on the giving side, right? So they are the person that holds the flogger and hits the person with the flogger, right? The reason that I and many people make a distinction between top and dominant is because you don't have to be a dominant to be a top, and you don't have to be a top to be a dominant, right? Yeah. And for me, because those things are separated, when I'm playing with someone that's new, whether they're new to the community or they're new to BDSM or they're new to me, I'm not their dominant. A dominant for me is someone that has taken conscious authority over another person's life. No matter what type, no matter how much, no matter how often, they have taken some sort of authority and said, I am your dominant. And they have said, you are my dominant. For me, in a situation where I'm showing somebody something, or even if I'm just playing for the first time, I had the opportunity last night to go to my first dungeon party and I don't even know how long. And I got to play with somebody
post-COVID,
right?
Post-COVID, yeah,
exactly. Which in that situation, as we were sitting on a couch and talking, and we kind of expressed what things that we both wanted to do, and we found that we had things in common, and we looked at each other and kind of said, "Do you want to play then?" And as we were talking about what was going to happen, never was there a time that she called me sir. Never was there a time that she said, whatever you want, right? We considered what I liked, what she liked, what we both wanted to do in the next hour or so, which sounded good to both of us. And the couple of things that one or both of us threw out that the other person didn't like, we said no to. The couple of things that we both liked that were against the dungeon rules, we said no to.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't look at those things any differently. If the dungeon says no breath play, I'm not doing breath play. If the bottom that I'm playing with says no breath play, I'm not doing breath play.
Right.
Like the rule that the space creates is the same rule that people create. If I'm, and if I'm not respecting that, I'm not being a good human, let alone a good top or a good dominant or a good leatherman or a good BDSM educator, and I'm definitely
whatever
not being
the definition is. Right. Yeah, whatever it is. Great. Awesome. Thank you for that clarification and all that goodness. I swear I turned off my notifications, y'all. I swear I did. Devyn witnessed it. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know how they come back every time we turn them off.
I know. I have an itch too. Oh. I've heard often that in these kind of relationships that reality is that the person at the bottom really is the one with more control. The sub is the one with all the control in these relationships, in that they're the one that really gets to say, nuh-uh, yes, please, nuh-uh. What do you think of that?
I think that for some people, in the way that they interpret those relationships, that can be true. But I very strongly disagree.
I'd love to hear it.
In my relationships, and my relationship with my property is different than any other dynamic that I've ever engaged in. I have engaged in DS and MS relationships on the bottom side of the slash. I identified as and operated as a slave for a little under a decade before I ever started doing D-type things. But for me, in those relationships, I actually had no power as a submissive. Not even, even though the option was there for me to say no because of my background and because of, my situations in life, I didn't have the ability to say no.
And here comes in that capacity, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I had the choice. I didn't have the capacity.
Right.
And for me, in my relationship, even just my relationship now, I don't have any more or any less power than my property does. Which one of the things you'll hear if you happen to like hang out with me and listen to some of my classes, you'll hear that I don't even like the term power exchange. I don't identify with it.
Why not?
Because for me, our power doesn't go anywhere. My power as a dominant, my property's power as a submissive or as a slave doesn't go anywhere. Stays right where it was the whole time.
And that's a new relationship though, right?
Yeah.
And this is a very established relationship that you have with this person. What about in other kinds of relationships? Do you believe in the power exchange there, or that it exists?
I don't believe that a person's personal power can go anywhere. Which is why I am much, much more fond of the term authority transfer or authority exchange. Because we don't do anything with somebody's personal power. I can't take power away from someone, but I can take the authority. I can choose how that power is used. My property is by far and large one of the most powerful people I've ever met. Could stop a truck. But but in our relationship, I decide how that strength and how that power is used. I decide whether or not it's used at all. But for me, I don't see power that way. I don't see that, I've heard, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that phrase that the submissive or the slave has all the power. The thing is that they have all of their power. But the dominant, the master, the owner, the daddy, the whoever, they have their own personal power.
Yeah.
And I don't know why people get this idea that submissives and slaves are the ones that need to say no. Because I have seen countless situations where the slave or submissive was perfectly fine and the dominant was miserable.
No,
the dominant sometimes also needs to say no.
Yeah. I mean, you also, as a dom or as a top, are empowered in what you choose to do in that scenario as well. It's not like the submissive has all the choice.
And I think that for me, when I hear that phrase, oh, the submissive has all the power because they can choose to end the relationship, are you implying then that the master or the dominant can't? And just let that sit for a minute. And usually the response to that is, well, I guess not.
Those of you, I'm seeing a few people popping on. I just want to say hi, welcome. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the chat. We're talking about empowered consent and power dynamics. Happy to have you here. Yeah, so you said something earlier, and I'd love to follow through with it a little bit. How that capacity, right? Because of past experience, how does trauma affect our ability to give empowered consent within power dynamics?
In so many ways.
Right.
in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma impacts our ability to consent in ways that basically shift how we operate.
Mm-hmm.
I can name dozens of times off the top of my head that every particle of my body wanted to scream no,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't move.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
I could, be laying somewhere, or standing somewhere, or talking to somebody, and every fiber of my being is screaming, I want this to stop. But for some reason, nothing happened.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations even where I thought I had said no, because I felt it so strongly. And, in talking to the person that I was interacting with, I never heard no. You never actually verbalized no. And, and the thing that I hold on to, as somebody that has experienced, different forms of trauma, and as somebody that now plays in some of these realms, one of the things that I hold on to is I am not responsible for how someone else feels, but I am responsible for my actions. And that has always been very, very important to me, and was even important to me when I was on the bottom side of the slash and I was experiencing things in a complete opposite way from how I experience them now. If I was playing with somebody or engaging in some activity with somebody and I wanted to say no, but I couldn't, that person has no idea what's happening and is in no way at fault for not stopping. But in my work with learning more things about inclusion and learning more things about different walks of life and things, one of the biggest things that I've taken from that is intent is not impact. Right. And so we still have to have those conversations. We do. Even if that person, never meant me harm and would have stopped as soon as they heard no, but they just never heard no. We still have to have that conversation. You hurt me. You violated my consent. You may not have known it. You may not have intended to do it, but you did. You mentioned earlier the Consent Academy. They have a terrific explanation of what that looks like when they talk about intent and impact. You're walking down the street and you step on somebody's toe and break their foot. You didn't mean to, but it doesn't change
how it impacted them.
The fact that it happened and the fact that it made them feel a way and it made something happen, sure, you didn't mean to. Sure, you didn't, wake up that day and say, I can't wait to go walk down the street. I'm going to break somebody's foot. Of course that didn't happen.
Right. And I'd love to point this out on both sides of the equation, right? I mean, this is on both sides of the power dynamic. If you are in that place of lower capacity with power, and you are not saying no, you're not intending to create a harm to the person that is continuing in relationship with you, whatever that experience is, that's continuing experience with you, even though you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Right. But it does still, or may still create harm. It's going to harm me in some ways, or I'm going to feel some kind of hurt or feelings around knowing that I've engaged in an experience with somebody that didn't really want to be in that experience. Right. Yeah. That's going to create impact on me no matter what it is. And vice versa. If I'm in a place of power and I engage in something unknowingly that the other person didn't want, it's going to impact them. So I think that it happens on both sides and that we have to acknowledge that because we both have responsibility.
I think that comes up so much when we talk about almost anything that concerns consent or negotiation or these relationships or setting these relationships up or continuing them, as so many people get stuck in, this happens in one direction. And it doesn't. No. Does not do that.
No.
It, submissives can be abusive just as dominants can be abusive. Dominants can get hurt just as submissives can get hurt. There is no, we're people.
And
or
there's no
gender,
gender assigned to either one of these spaces.
No.
No,
it's, you know, I've met just as many men and just as many women and just as many non-binary folks that have it. There is no specific thing when it comes to that. It doesn't, you know, I said thing because I can't think of another word. But it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
We are people. And one of the biggest things that I talk about is there's a difference between your role and the thing that makes you happy, the type of relationship you want, the type of play that you engage in, and who you are as a person. Right? You can have a submissive personality and be a dominant person. You can engage as a dominant with a submissive personality. You can engage as a submissive with a dominant personality. But, you know, none of that changes the fact that you can hurt people and people can hurt you. You know, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
There's no stop to that. Like, oh, well, I'm a dominant, I can't get hurt. Oh, I'm a submissive, I can't be abusive. Like that. No, that's
no. So say you have inadvertently caused harm. How do you clean that up?
I think for me, it really depends on the situation, because there's a very strong difference between if I've made someone feel uncomfortable, or if I've violated someone's consent or made them upset in some way. If I just met them and I'm just engaging in a casual situation with them, you know, if I'm sitting at a party and somebody says, hey, I've heard really good things about your sharp, pointy nails, I want to try them, you know, and I go out and reach to their hand and start dragging my nail on their hand. They go, whoa, 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 whoa. I wanted you to put that on my leg. I didn't give you permission to touch my arm. That is very, very different from in my relationship with my property when I step on its feelings. Right? If there's something that I do that actually upsets my property, there's a very different process for those two scenarios. You know, in the first scenario where I'm touching somebody in a way that I didn't realize was not okay with them. You know, they didn't tell me where to put my nails. I just put my nails on a body part. You know, I usually use people's arms. I didn't realize that was a no zone for you, you know? So my first reaction is to take a step back. And like, the first thing I'm going to do is stop touching them if I'm still touching them. You know, as soon as somebody says, whoa, or hey, or stop, or, you know, something, I'm going to step back. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my hands off them.
Yeah.
And then ask what's wrong.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we go into this, you know, when they tell me why, and they tell me what, you know, what upset them and how upset they are and how they're feeling. And, you know, the next thing from me is, what do you need from me? Because I don't know, you know, for some people, just a quick, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, that's enough for them.
Yeah.
For some people, they need more restoration. For some people, they need more conversation. You know, and it could be any number of things that I've done, or, you know, something that I've stepped on. We, you know, in the BDSM community, we call them landmines. You had no idea that was there.
Yeah.
But with my property, we have a protocol in place for when that happens. We have a system that we have specifically designed together to have a process. What happens when I upset you? In a way that's not fun, in a way that's not okay.
Yeah.
In a way that actually hurts you. How do we deal with that? And we created a system that works for us, that works for it, and works for me, that we engage in when that happens.
Yeah.
But I don't have that with somebody that I just met.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. You know, I know exactly what my property needs when it's upset.
Yeah.
I have no idea what, you know, Joe Schmo Blondie over there needs. No idea, you know, but
I want to underline that for those of you watching. I can't say enough how much you need to communicate and clarify. Anytime you're assuming the other person should know, even in a long-term relationship, should know what you need in order to feel restored or even engaged or turned on, whatever the assumption is you're making that the other should have for you. Put it aside. Keep asking. Just like Devyn said earlier as well, you know, one person shaking can be a sign of extreme turn on. The other person shaking is fear and not acceptable. Crying, the same. Any of these responses that we have. And it's the same with our needs around what we need to feel heard, understood. You know.
I think too that, you know, you bring up a great point there too with, you know, people responding differently. It's actually one of the most common things that I hear in BDSM 101 classes is, you know, a good dominant or a good top watches for body language. That's horseshit. That's not how that works. There's communication that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think that watching for body language is a good idea, but don't assume what you see in that body language is what you think it is.
Exactly.
Watch for it and then ask, hey, I think I'm seeing this. Is that what's happening? Or I think I'm seeing this. What's happening there? Right?
Yeah.
Keep asking, keep communicating.
And I've seen so many situations where, you know, even if it's something external to the scene, I played with somebody a few years ago that, you know, when I turned around to give them their blanket, they did a shudder motion and pulled back from me. And I thought they were scared of the blanket, you know, but what happened was somebody walked into the dungeon at the exact same time that I did that. And they were holding an implement in their hand that scared her. Had nothing to do with me. You know, here I am like wrapping up a scene thinking I'm scaring you, starting aftercare. Yeah. I'm like, what did I do? What happened? Because we've had a conversation about what fear looks like on your body. And that's the way it looks. So and what did I do?
Yeah.
You know, and she was like, common. Oh, what's that?
It's common. We do it all day long. We're defining the world around us. We're creating stories about our place within it and how other people are responding to us as well without asking them.
Yep.
All day long we're doing
all
that.
The time.
Yep. All the time. And it's causing a lot of heartache, quite honestly, a lot of problems, and which is one of the reasons this is such my passion, helping people learn to communicate clearly. First of all, just tap into what your own needs and desires are. Because if you're always in your head thinking about what other people are wanting, needing, doing, you're not tapped into your own.
And I think it's so funny too that, you know, one of the most common phrases I've heard in my lifespan is the phrase, assume makes an ass out of you and me, so don't do it. But somehow it's like the top of our list of things that we do.
Well, and especially within power dynamics. And I want to just, I love tips and tools. And I just want people out there, you know, if you know that you have a hard time saying no, or saying yes, if you know you have a difficult time in some areas of your life, speaking your truth, then put support systems into place when you're going to go into those places. Practice saying no, saying yes. Practice what you might want to say if certain things come up. Have people in the space if you need them. Have communicated with the person you're engaging in an experience with prior that it may be difficult for you to communicate and what that looks like. Start putting together systems of support. And I would even say, try to not enter into things that you can help if you don't have the ability to, the capacity to express your authentic consent. There's some places in life where you can't do that, right? We can't not go to certain places in life. But you need to put support into place for wherever you can.
I think too that, you know, so many people talk about how, you know, you can't engage in this stuff if you can't advocate for yourself. And I think too that, you know, when you discover that you have trouble advocating for yourself and giving that empowered consent, there's an issue that pops up because some of that, it's not overnight. You know, if you just realize that about yourself, you can't fix it by tomorrow.
Right.
You know, so my advice would be similar, you know, but take the time to put those support structures in place. I've often had friends ask me if I can be their no. You know, and they sit with me and tell me the things that bother them, the things that make them uncomfortable, what they look like when they're upset, they're scared, they're sad, they're frustrated, you know. And when I see that, I have the ability to step up and stop that scene.
Yeah.
And say, hey, that person gave me their no, and I'm using it.
Fantastic.
I think they would want to say no right here. And if I'm wrong, they continue.
Yeah.
Right? And if I'm right, it stops.
Yeah. Great example of support. You can write stuff down ahead of time that you're aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're entering into an experience that you haven't been a part of before and you're not sure what your no or yes is going to be, you can try to tap into what body language might appear so that the person you're engaged with can ask you if they see signs, right? So start finding ways, don't not experience life, but find ways to put support into place for yourself so that you can begin to gain the capacity to express yourself as you move forward within it.
I mean, when I first started being able to exercise a no, I couldn't verbalize it. So I used hand signals.
Fantastic. Exactly.
You know, I could get it out of my body, but I couldn't get it out of my mouth.
Yeah. Hi, Christian. Thanks for joining us. I love you watching the replay. Hopefully we'll get you on a empowered conversation again. We got a comment, which was actually really helpful. Thanks, Christian, because I was wondering if we were getting comments. So I appreciate you sending us a comment and letting me know that we're here. Ah, exciting stuff. We kind of moved out of the trauma conversation. We've just been following the thread. But I do like tools and tips. So I want to just circle back quickly for a second. If you know that you have a hard time because of past trauma, what kind of support can you get? What can you do there?
I think for me, one of my first steps was therapy. That helped a lot. I also had a friend that I was really close to, that would advocate for me in situations where I couldn't advocate for myself. And we came up with a couple of hand signals that I could throw at her. Yeah. So I didn't even have to point it toward the person that I needed to stop. I could just point at her. And then she could take that and make the thing stop. So I've created situations like that. I think hand signals are unbelievably powerful in so many different ways. You know, I used to use them because I couldn't verbalize no. Now I use them with my bottoms because I'm half deaf and dungeons are loud. You know, so they're super versatile and they're useful for a lot of different reasons. Another one that I would say is educate yourself about yourself. I think we focus a lot, especially in the intimacy and BDSM and sexuality worlds. We educate ourselves a lot on things like safety and procedure and, you know, how to be good at a thing or how to get better at a thing. And I think we don't focus nearly enough on learning ourselves and learning the things that make us tick. And for me, one of the biggest steps in creating that empowered consent for myself was to figure out what the things were that were the barriers to that. Because I started out with, I just can't say no. And then started picking apart the situations where I couldn't say no and what caused them. And so I started to figure out, oh, if this happens, then I lose my ability to say no. Right. I can tell people that. Right. You know, I could verbalize to somebody, hey, if during our scene I start crying, it's because I've gone into an emotional place and I have lost my ability to say no at that point. You know, and that this is what I want to do when that happens, because every fiber of me is going to want to say no, but I'm not going to be able to. So this is what I want you to do as soon as you notice I'm crying. Great. Right. But if we don't take the time to really think about ourselves and our situations and the things that make us feel those things, we'll never be able to change. You know, no change happens without knowledge. I'm right there with you. Self-awareness. Yeah. We need to gain agency. We have to gain an awareness of what's happening within our own emotional regulation. Yes. Yeah. So that we can
make the choices that serve us and communicate those choices to those around us. If we're
Absolutely.
so overrun by trauma responses in the moment, we're not going to be able to communicate that. We need to do it before we hit that, if at all possible. I mean, it's very obviously easy to get into a trigger response unconsciously, and that's very normal. However, if we can enter in prior with the awareness that that may occur for us, and these are the ways that we can be supported, like you said, if I start crying, that's it. I won't be able to say no, right? Those are those support systems that we need.
I mean, I've even had conversations with people about their trauma response.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that you'll hear a Consent Academy talk about all the time is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yeah.
That's really useful to know about a person if you're going to engage in something with them and you know there's trauma there.
Yeah.
You know,
Huge.
if they already know how they respond and they can give you that information, you know, well, what happens is I freeze and then I can't move and then I start shaking. I'm going to remember all of those things. And so when it starts happening in real time, I'm going to recognize it and say, wait, when we negotiated, they said this particular set of things means they're going into a trauma headspace.
Yeah.
I should stop because that's what we discussed.
Right. You already, now you have the awareness to hold that space for them. Hi,
Yeah.
Lisa. Thanks for giving us all the love. I'm so happy to see that you're engaged with us. Nice. Absolutely.
So
And for
important.
those of you that are watching, I've had people ask me before, everyone's aware, or a lot of you are aware of fight, flight, or freeze, but a lot of people are not aware of fawning. Fawning is actually extremely common. It's more what I do rather than fight, flight, or freeze. Or my history would be fawning, which is super pleasing. Let me just make everything okay. Let's just make everything okay. I grew up with an alcoholic father who would explode. So for me, be really nice, be really sweet, make everything okay so that doesn't happen. Fawning. Anyone relate? Yeah, it's another common reaction.
Absolutely.
And I would say really important to let people know if you know that, because pleasing can be really sweet and yummy to be pleased, but not if people are fawning when they're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are getting closer to the end. This has been such a juicy conversation. Is there anything before we head into the resource roundtable that you feel like you want to leave with our viewers around creating empowered consent in power dynamics? Any last?
Self-awareness is key.
Yeah.
That we can't have any of these things without self-awareness, you know, and there are some things I feel like people need to experience before they figure out how they feel about it, but not everything works that way. There are plenty of things that you've never experienced in life that you can just tell that you don't want to experience.
Yeah, I have a few of those.
I know for a fact I never want to go skydiving. I have no interest in, you know, you could ask me all day, well, have you tried it? No. And I don't
wanna.
I don't need to try it. I know I wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's, you know, there are some things that you have to try to figure it out. You know, I wasn't sure I liked broccoli, then I had to try it. Right. But you know, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter whether or not I like almonds. I'm allergic to them, so I'm not going to eat them. Like, you know, but self-awareness is the only thing that we can get that stuff from.
Yeah.
Right? We can't, you know, we don't have agency until we have self-awareness. We don't have empowered consent until we have self-awareness. We don't have relationships. We don't have good friendships. We have nothing until we know ourselves.
Very true.
I think the last thing I'll leave you with is self-awareness is not a destination, it's a journey.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Perfect. I'm going to just underline that, note that, and thank you for this delicious conversation.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed this. This was fun.
Yeah, it's been super fun. And for those of you watching, Devyn's information is in the chat, the description above. And we are now hitting what I like to call the resource roundtable, which is where any offers or information around how you can work with me or Devyn, we're going to give you that information now. And I like that to be super consensual. So if you want to stay and listen to what's coming up, how you can work with Devyn or myself, welcome. We love you to stick around and hear, listen to what's coming up. If you would prefer not to stay and you've gotten what you needed, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you next week. All right, Devyn, what you got?
Let's see. So I think you already have my website link somewhere. But
the website link is in the description. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I have coming up that's real exciting, in just a few days, actually on the 31st, I'm going to teach with Blackthorn Events. And I'm actually going to teach my class called Why I Don't Own Them Yet, which basically is me giving folks a picture into how I develop my power exchange relationships. So it's kind of a picture into how I negotiate from I'm interested in a relationship to a permanent collar. So it's kind of a picture of that. And I really, really enjoy that class. And that book is actually coming out in the next 6 months or so.
I love that. And I'm seeing that you put your link in our private chat. So I'm going to put it in the regular chat.
Yes, wonderful.
So everyone can see it. There's Devyn's website. And you already do have some books out, don't you?
Yes, I do. I have a book on cigar service and cigar play, and then I have what I call my quick reference series, which is little bite-sized 20 to 30 page books about everything from negotiating a play scene to negotiating authority transfer to attending your first kink convention, and several other topics. But they're real little, like 20 to 30 page books. I love them. That was a lot of fun to put together. And when I'm not teaching, I am available as an alternative lifestyles coach. If you have attended a interview or class or anything that I've been involved in, if you ever heard me speak publicly, you automatically have access to discounts and all sorts of fun stuff. And I have autographed books, and I have coaching packages, and I do everything from I don't know what I want, but I think I'm kinky, to I know I'm kinky and I have a partner, but we're not sure how to negotiate a relationship, all the way to I want to be a kink educator myself. I actually have a BDSM educator primer coming up on August 14th, which is an 8-hour intensive on how I do the thing as a full-time BDSM educator.
Fantastic. All kinds of goodness, y'all. Check Devyn out. He has lots coming up and lots already available. And it sounds like you are just an amazing resource. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.
And I am not offering anything right now. I'm percolating. My Speak Desire course is about to launch again soon, but I don't have a date for you yet. That's a course where we get together and I really help you learn how to speak your desires so that you can get heard, understood, and fulfilled. And we really step into that self-awareness, and we step into expressing it a lot, because I really believe if you are not fulfilled in your relationships, if you don't have that awareness and that expression, you are living a half life, quarter life. You are settling for mundane, and I'm not about it. So I'll let you all know when I'm getting ready to launch that, and you can actually private message me if you want with your email, and I'll send you that information, as well as just keep watching out and you'll get notified. All right, next week, Empowered Consent in Long-Term Relationships, right here, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday. As always, the invitation is empowerment. Have a gorgeous, pleasure-filled day. Thank you, Devyn.
Thank you
so much, and thanks everyone for joining.